Frankfurt begrüßt den Alternativnobelpreisträger und Präsident von BioVision, Hans Herren.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. It's very nice to be here, and I want to thank Angie and Adam for the invitation to these EARTHtalks. I'm very honored to be with very prominent persons on this evening discussion and presentations. What I wanted to, was asked actually to discuss tonight here, is about climate change and food security. Has the wake-up call come? You all know we've been discussing a lot, and unfortunately we should have had the head of the IPCC here tonight. Unfortunately, he's not here, but he would have been given some interesting data on the interaction between this climate change and food. So I will talk a bit about this and see, okay, what can we do? What can this somebody also do to change things into the right direction? So first we'll talk about the problem. I think it's important that we understand the problem. If you don't understand the problem, we can't really talk about it. Then we need to talk about transforming agriculture and the food system, because it's not only one side, but it is the whole system we need to change. And then what are the challenges to do this, and what are the solutions for, again, this somebody? So first we have to look at the problem and see, okay, where are we actually with all these issues of food security? We today have about 850 million people who don't go to bed with full stomach. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, because these are the ones who have no food for the whole year. There's many, many out there who actually have no food certain days of the year. So again, I think there's many more out there. At the same time, and this is really the problem, we have 1.5 billion obese people, 300 million people out there also with diabetes type 2. So on the one hand, people have not enough. On the other hand, actually they have too much. And not only too much, but not the right type of food, not the healthy food which we need. So we really have a health problem. The industrial food, or also the conventional food system, uses 10 calories to produce 1. So, you know, any system which uses more calorie than it produces, in the end, is a bankrupt system. So how long are we actually going to use a bankrupt system to carry us forward in the 22nd century? So we have a huge energy problem there, when actually we shouldn't have one. Because of this, and also the way we do agriculture, also what we do with our food, we have an enormous climate change problem, because instead of actually dealing with the problem, we're adding to it, and I will show you the details later. So we have a big climate change problem. So in agriculture, basically, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Soil degradation, we are losing soil. You know, this is the basis of our food source is the soil. It's not so much the seed is there too, but if there's no soil, there's nothing. So we really have to take care much more of our soils. We only have 1.5 billion hectares, and we are losing about 20 million hectares every year. And why? It's because we don't do what we actually know what to do to solve that problem already. Water shortages, crisis in many places. 70% of the fresh water goes into agriculture, but now people in the cities, which are more and more, want also some water. So what do? We have lost a lot of biodiversity, and biodiversity is essential for our future food security, in particular when you know that climate will change, the needs will change out there, and so we don't have all this diversity to adapt to the climate change. And so that's sort of the natural resource problem. And we also have a huge social problem building up, is that we're taking people out of agriculture and then we put them where? In the slums. Into these mega cities where many, many people don't have any work, so they end up to be hungry in the city instead of being probably hungry in the countryside, where we could find work for them if we wanted to. But again, we're not really doing what we need to do, and so we have this jobs problem, which is a key issue for any politicians out there. Jobs first, all the rest comes later. So you can see now what the system we have today basically is creating huge amount of problems when it doesn't have to. So when you look at what is actually contributing in agriculture to this, to climate change, so again, in the long run, we will have huge problem because of this climate change to which we contribute. So productivity, so here we have issues with the quantity and also the quality of crops. Agricultural practices, because we do the wrong thing, we promote climate change. If we were to do something else, we could actually absorb a lot of this CO2, which is up in the air, and be better off in the future. Because of the problem, the way we grow food, we create issues with our soils and the capacity to absorb water, to release nutrients, so we have to add them artificially, which again then also adds to the climate change. And because we have lost, in our rural areas, we have losses and gains of cultivated land. So the gains come from forest cutting, and the losses come from doing bad practices. So again, when I said that we lose 20 million hectares a year, this is really something we shouldn't be doing. And when land becomes scarce, speculations, prices go up, food prices actually should also go up. What happened a lot is farmers go out of business because they can't pay the bills for their farm, nor for the inputs, which also are growing, because the agriculture we're talking about now, so the industrial type of agriculture relies on oil, on fossil fuel, and that is something which is finite and which the price will go up. So we need to make sure we change that. And then we have issues of adaptation out there, and again, this adaptation, as we move and we change, we can adapt. But are we adapting into the right direction? I think that's also something we really have to think about, because right now we're going to have more pests, more temperatures. We may have more extreme weather patterns, which means more droughts and more floods. And this is already making a risky business, which is the riskiest business in the world, is to be a farmer, even more riskier. So we have a system out there which is based on artificial input. So everything we have been doing so far, is it working? Okay, here. So the increase of production, be it meat or the cereals, is really connected to more water, more nitrogen fertilizer, more phosphorus, more pesticides. So you can see that this is certainly not something sustainable. When you go up, you have to all these inputs. So is there something else we can do? And really this is the basis of what we all know about, is the green revolution. And for many people who have studied this, and I had the honor to be the co-chair of the biggest report on agriculture, called Agriculture at a Crossroads. We already have said that this type of system is bankrupt, needs to be changed. That was back in 2008. Question is, are we doing something about it? Not really, because we are always waiting for a techno fix. But I think in that case, it won't happen. We also hear that we need to grow more food. Actually, we are producing today 4,600 calories per person on the earth, which means that if we were to eat normally, we could actually feed or nourish, which is the better word, twice the population of today. So then, do we need more? No. We need different food. We need quality food, not quantity. We need to grow it in areas of the world where there is not enough. We need to stop creating surpluses in Europe, in North America, which actually then go and feed basically the markets in the south, make it impossible for the farmers in the south to produce, because they cannot be competitive in a global market where the excess food from the north is heavily subsidized and competes unfairly in the south. So from the 4,600, actually, if you look at it, really, how much do we consume? Really, about 2,000. Well, we're a bit more than 2,000 because part of what we feed our animals, there are those 800 calories which are produced per day. Some of them, probably about 10% or so roughly, will end up also on our plate. So you can see a lot of wastage. But the worst of all is the losses, the wastage. And you have all seen those movies, which are plenty around these days, on food waste. And so in the developed countries, we can see here between what, 40 and 100% or so, 60% or so, 50 in the average, actually are thrown away. They're wasted. So then on one hand, people say we need more, so we need to grow more, add more water, more pesticides, more fertilizer. On the other hand, we just buy it and throw it away. So you can draw your conclusion on what is the problem here. And then in developing countries, actually, we have another problem. We have a lot of losses, actually, before even it reaches the market, and then also losses on the market because they don't have the facilities, refrigeration, etc., which will be very useful. So you can see, so this is the, sort of the picture of our food system. Now, anyone who looks at this can say, but there's something wrong here, right? Something wrong with that picture. Certainly it is. And because we waste so much, we produce about half of the greenhouse gases in our industrial food system. That's more than just the transportation alone. So again, I think that an agricultural system, and food system, who should actually be sort of taking away from the climate change is adding to it. And where does it come from in agriculture? So, well, we have a big deal is the nitrogen fertilizer, which farmers are putting more and more on. This is an invention for the last World War. And around the world, we've been using a whole lot more of this stuff, which basically destroys our soils, makes the plants weak, and very easily attacked by insect and diseases. So we produce more on the one side, but it is not of good quality. And again, here, I think we ought to change things. Never mind other areas in agriculture which also produce greenhouse gases, which we could be dealing with much better. But if you look forward now, the CO2 in the air goes up. And what's happening there is that for the major crop, some new research shows that we have less nutrients. So we're going to have less zinc, iron, and even proteins in many of our crops as we go forward. Now we just know that we want better nutrition. We don't want more calories, but we want more nutrition. So here we are again making a problem for ourselves in the years to come. We live on one planet. It's one sphere, which is limited. Some people dream of going to Mars. Fine, let them go if they want to. But the majority of us is going to stuck here. So we should better take care of our world. But we have boundaries. The planetary boundaries are there. And we cannot continue just to sort of ignore them. For example, our biodiversity. In 50 years of industrial agriculture, we have lost 75% of that biodiversity, which exactly will help us adapt to the changes out there. Farmers over the eons have selected a lot of plants. We are growing actually large scale only about 15% of the 8,000 we could consume. So that's not very smart, because diversity creates resilience. So we need to do what we can do there. And here you can see on the nitrogen cycle, we're way beyond the green limit here of what the planet can regenerate every year. So we should be careful, and also the climate change. So you can see basically everything we look at, no matter what almost, we're going in the wrong direction. Never mind, again, all the discussion which has been happening. We want more diversity in our food and our plates. Lost crops of Africa, lost crops of everywhere. Again, they're all there, and they are very nutritious. They're not those highly bred plants which have lost all their nutrition and are just feeding us starch. Therefore, all this obesity out there, at least, is partly responsible for that. So we want landscapes which are diverse, where we have many different plants. We want plates which are diverse too. We don't want to just eat something like this one, which is actually the famous golden rice you have all heard about. This is the golden rice. So if you eat that rice, you don't have to eat carrots, because you will get your provitamin A. But do you want to eat golden rice and no carrots? So why should that be good for the people in developing countries? So I think we know we need to be fair here and say, no, we don't need that stuff because it's no good for nobody. When you look at what we had 100 years ago, this is sort of the number of varieties of the different major crops, and vegetables in particular here. So look at cabbages, for example, and look how many are left today. 20 from 544. So throughout, we are simplifying the system, and which actually then has a long rat tail of problems coming with it. And these are just sort of small examples. Now, the biggest problem we have is actually the consumption patterns are not in line with our production patterns. Because you cannot continue to consume as we consume and also throw away and think the system on farm will change for sustainability. It can't. Because we have here, this is sort of the pyramid of today. So we eat a lot of meat, dairy products, and only little vegetables and fruit. So this actually has a very high footprint. So you can see here the environmental impact is very high with this diet. So we ought to change this over here, and this should be the preferred type of food pyramid. Are we moving there? Not really. In many countries in the world, meat production is going up. Even in Europe, still in most countries, meat consumption is going up, and that goes against everything we should be doing. I'm not personally telling you to be vegetarians, but I think, if you want to eat meat of quality, which comes from our grazing land, which globally, we have 3.5 billion hectares of grazing land around the world. So that's where cattle should be grazing, if anything, not eating soybeans and corn, which they're not even built for, and for which we have then used huge amount of antibiotics. So you can see, everything we do is wrong. Plants also will not adapt easily to new conditions because they have been evolving for eons on certain temperatures. So as soon as you go out of a certain optimum, yields will go down. And it's been calculated for every degree up, there will be a loss of 15% in production. So that's a lot of losses out there to come if we're not careful. Our system has actually been sort of made less resilient because we have put houses and roads and warehouses. We changed the landscape so that it can deal with many of the problems we're going to have with climate change. And already this shows you here what already has happened in the past. We have a number of cases where the system has failed to deal with droughts and, let's say, floods. So, the main solutions. We need a fundamental shift. We need to shift from where we are and into something else, a new paradigm. And when you look at agriculture, we have to take not only the production, again, we're taking, as I said, the consumption. And then that goes back into production. So we really have to look at the system, and that the UN agencies, many organizations are actually been saying we need to make the change, but because of huge vested interests, we are not moving. And I think this is one of the biggest blockages we have in the world today, are vested interests, elephants in the room who actually don't move, and we can move forward. The paradigm change is basically to transition from this sort of conventional industrial agriculture, which is heavy inputs. Not only just about the machines, I'm talking about inputs. So we need to go away from this, and in agriculture which is resilient, which employs people, and which produces good nutrition and not just a lot of calories. And we need to also take a systemic look. We have the tendency generally of doing linear stuff, quarterly reports. That's not the way the world works. It's certainly not the food system we are thinking of. So a systemic approach would be to look at the 3 dimensions of sustainable development all together. If one of these 3 doesn't really work, the system doesn't work. You cannot ignore the people, the culture, you cannot ignore the environment, and you cannot ignore either the whole issue of the economics. So everything has to be right, so I think we can move forward. And this is just a small, what's going on? Okay. So here the transition. So how do we want to move? So we need to move basically from this side here where we are over to a more ecological, sustainable agriculture. But this will only be possible if we then also link in here this change in our diets. And then the farmer will start to produce what the people actually should be eating rather than what they do. So these changes here are really essential if we want to have food for the future generation. Don't worry about the details. This is to show this is just a small part of the agricultural and food system. So if we don't understand all these connections, how are we going to fix it? Is anyone really start to think systemic? Is anyone thinking, where is or where are the key blockages? And I think we need to understand this. So that's why there's a whole science of system thinking out there, but we are ignoring it. So we say, oh, we don't produce enough, don't worry. Take a GMO, make it so that the plant grows underwater, and we are okay. No, we are not okay, because there's a lot of other things here who play into the picture we need to think about. We have a huge problem actually in we know varieties, we have rice and wheat and potatoes out there, we could produce much more than they do, an yield gap. But that yield gap actually can be filled only by one thing, it's better agronomy, better soils. So again, as I said earlier, the whole solution to our problems of food production everywhere. To produce quality food, you need a healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animals, healthy people, healthy environment. So this is actually the cycle I think we want to talk about. Nitrogen, we have seen before that because of the nitrogen we're using, we are producing a lot of greenhouse gases. Well, we have 78% of nitrogen in the air. And we have plants out there who have evolved, who can take it and put it to the ground. We don't have to use natural gas, a lot of energy, and then produce a nitrogen fertilizer, which costs a lot of money, ends up in the ocean, destroys our animals and fish and shrimps and everything else in the ocean. So we don't need all this, so we can change it. And here, what I just wanted to point to one thing. If you have a soil who has really good organic matter, what you do when you do organic agriculture or sustainable agriculture, you can have about 800,000 liters per hectare of water absorbed versus only about 160 or less when you have your normal soils. No wonder we have problems out there when there's a drought or a flood. And here you can see, this is in 95, but you could have done the same last year in many areas, organic versus what's happening in conventional agriculture. You can see this is the same environment. So in organic, because water was there, when there's a drought, plant grow, versus here where they're very thin with very low yield. The same when you have rains. Here in organic systems, the water will be absorbed. Here, the plant will die because they rot away in the water. So again, those stresses. Can we actually do things different? I spent 27 years in Africa, where yields are low. So we developed some systems there where you can actually grow maize. This is zero fertilizer in these soils. We just cover them with a plant who takes the nitrogen from the air, puts it in the ground, problem solved. And then also you have no weeds. These weeds here, those nice purple flowers, actually are killing the maize plants here. You can see the difference. So again, there are systems there which we can actually use to solve our problem. This is this plant on the ground, smothers all the weeds, provides nitrogen, and guess what? It deals with the pests also, because here they will actually attract the good bugs and make life difficult for the bad bugs. So these type of systems exist, but they're not being promoted. We know about good bugs and bad bugs. This one here was a very bad bug, which was destroying the food source of 200 million people. This guy here is a good guy. We found it. We let it loose. In about 12 years, we solved the problem from Senegal to Mozambique. We saved about 20 million lives, and the whole thing costed $20 million. Permanent, natural, no pesticides, no permanent cost nowhere. So you see, we have solutions. The trick is, are we actually applying them? What are we doing with our bees? 80% of what you eat is pollinated by bees. So what we do, we spray the environment and kill all these bees. As you all know, the problem, we have seen movies about it. I mean, it's a total massacre out there. Even the chemical industry is suing Brussels right now because they decided to put a ban on some pesticides or killing bees. They don't want to accept the fact that we can do different, and we can. And here, GMOs, this is reductionism. The whole biotech of what to try to solve our problems is actually directed at the symptom of our problem and not the cause. And so I call the whole issue of making those plants, this is the biggest and the costliest distraction in science in the 21st century. I can only imagine something has taken so much attention, media, money, and research for basically solving no problem, treating a symptom. And the fact was it that in '95, these were like all the varieties they had were like 100 in the US. So today, that's what the choice is. Basically, farmers have no more choice of seeds, and whatever they buy, they have to actually, they can only rent the seeds. They don't even buy seeds, they rent it. So that's how far we are going with our system. Soybean, the same thing. So, you know, this is not, I think, the way to go. Now, farming, to do sustainable farming is very complicated. It takes a lot of knowledge. So what we need to do here, we need to have much more training, capacity development all over the world, here and over there, because no farmer, no person is born with genes who actually make them sort of be farmers, right? It has to be learned. And it's easy to throw some fertilizer and some pesticides out there. It's much more complicated to make compost and do sustainable agriculture. So can it even be done? That's the big question. And yes, it can be done. Again, this big report on agriculture showed, you know, that if you put money into pre- and harvest losses, better management, research and development, food processing, and reduce losses, you actually can change the system and really make things go all the way by only spending $140 billion a year. This is 1/3 of the subsidies of Europe and US into agriculture. And if you do that by 2050, this is the green scenario, you actually grow more. This is putting the same money in the old agriculture. So you can see that the production, crops or total production is up here when you do green. You have more employment. You have better soil quality. You use much less water. You also use less land, not more. And we deforest a whole lot less, half. And we produce even a little bit more. So if anyone tells you organic, bio, or whatever sustainable agriculture cannot feed the world, I say yes, it's not feeding, but it can nourish the world. It can nourish everybody on this planet, also by 2050. And this is the demonstration. And even we can do it by reducing the footprint, which is important, and also, as I said, employment goes up. Reducing poverty is also a big topic, can you see here? So if we go green, we can do a lot of things good. So are we doing it? We tried. The Rio conference in 2012 has said we need to change. So they really gave us some orders. They gave orders to the governments, and they all signed on it. They tried to go to a government and ask, what are you doing? Oh, yeah, we don't know, maybe not much. And there's a center in Rome which links together all the UN agencies in agriculture, and there, basically, the discussion is on now, how are we going to carry that change? How are we going to make the change from where we are today, something not sustainable, where we risk really to bring the world population into great, great troubles in matter of food security, to something where actually everybody would have not only enough food, they would have access to it, and we have access to quality food, to nutritious food. And that's, I think, what's important. And so activities are going on at the national level, it's important, and activities are going on international level. And you may all have heard about the Sustainable Development Goals, and which is being negotiated now. And I think it's important for everyone to try to push to make sure that in those goals, there are targets which really go towards sustainable agriculture. We want less soil degradation, we want better nutrition, we want, again, more smallholder farmers in the world, we want more diversity, not only in our plates, because that diversity will also find itself in the field. So these are a number of demands which I think we can all ask, and you as citizens, I think, need to ask and look for. But what do you want? This is printed food. This is now. This is actually only from maize. To do that, you only need maize fields like this. Actually, you could have enough food. But is that what you want? I think that's what you want, right? So if you want that, what's going to happen? This is the landscape you will have. Now you can choose. In the end, the consumer will choose what kind of a system we will have in the years to come. And again, that somebody is you, is myself. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That sounds so logical. You had this, we're not taking really questions from the public here because we're too big for real dialogue. There's another opportunity tomorrow, I'll announce that in short. I've got one question that came via Twitter and that's in my head too. That sounds so logical. It sounds like, okay, great, let's do it. It's not even, doesn't even cost a lot. You had this one chart with a lot of details. You said, don't worry about the details, but can you tell us who's stopping us from doing this? And what can really everybody in the room do to change that?
I think we need to re-establish the whole democratic process because a few people, a few companies have taken over what is in your plate. They have taken over what the farmers do and also what they plant. So I think it is really at the very highest level of action. I think people need to say, look, we are fed up with this. We want another system, which means that you have to go look for new people who will represent you, people who will deal with a private sector, not the whole one, but there are some companies, multinationals, who have taken over. And I think so that's where I think we can, through, well, maybe you check and you boycott. I mean, I propose that we should be boycotting some products which we are not sure what is it. Boycotting the products from companies who actually are forcing on you today, and even more so tomorrow, stuff, I think, which is not healthy for anybody.
Like an example?
But
I mean, we
some
could
of them
start here
are,
now,
oh
if
yes,
you tell us what.
I mean, some are home in St. Louis and some are home in Basel, so, you know, so you can...
Okay, thanks a lot. There's an opportunity to talk with Hans Herren at, in a smaller venue. I'll change to German again, because you understand that. Es gibt morgen noch eine Gelegenheit.
So tomorrow there's an opportunity of talking to Mr. Hans Herren in a smaller framework. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning in the hub. All the information is available on ERDgespäche.net. You can also register for this workshop. Thank you very much, Hans Herren. Good evening. Thank you.